There's one main factor that holds back a ton of copywriters, media buyers, salespeople, setters, closers, basically individual contributors within sales and marketing. And this really holds them back from ever starting their own company and really kind of achieving the goals that they actually want to have in life. I dealt with this myself in the past when I was a salesperson, also when I was a copywriter, but I feel like I finally have a pretty good handle on it now, to the point where I've really been able to make some exponential leaps in my own business, my own income, and all that good stuff. The main thing I'm talking about here is having a big picture understanding of how client acquisition works. When you look at a lot of these individual roles, like let's say you are a salesperson, let's say you're a closer, the only thing you can do is get deals across the line, which is a very important skill, by the way. It's super important to be able to close deals. But at the same time, if you can't handle the top of the funnel, you're going to be stuck taking 10, maybe 15% on the deal if you're lucky for the rest of your life, as opposed to taking 100% like the business owner does. So it is very important to, or if you're looking at the case of like copywriter, for example, you might do a deal for say $5,000 a month that generates your clients, in my case, like $150,000, $200,000 a month. So you're taking, like 2% of the revenue you're generating there. So that's really not the end goal, in my opinion. I think that the end goal, whether you are a salesperson, a marketer, whatever it is to be able to do everything from end to end, be able to do client acquisition from end to end, and also be able to know each and every part of those things very, very well. That's kind of the key to just being a weapon in any single organization you walk into. So in this video today, I want to walk through just the way that I look at client acquisition, how I look at it from end to end, how I diagnose gaps in companies that I'm looking at doing deals with, consulting for, or running marketing teams for as a fractional CMO. So let's walk through each of these pieces. So start off, first and foremost, we're looking at, where do we start with marketing? Top of the funnel always starts with leads. So if I'm taking, say, a consulting call, first question I ask right off the bat, how many leads do you have? How many leads are you bringing in on a monthly basis? So we look at lead volume. Then you also look at lead quality. That would be MQLs. So we're looking at it on a qualitative and also a quantitative standpoint. So we've got to see that. We've got to see cost. What's our cost per lead? How much are we paying to acquire each of these leads? And if we want to get a little bit more deep in the weeds here, you'd also look at lead source. Where are these leads coming from? Are they coming from Facebook ads? Are they coming from YouTube ads, Google ads? Are they coming from email? Maybe they're coming from IG organic. Maybe it's LinkedIn. Maybe it's YouTube organic. Most companies are not doing all of these. Usually when I do a fractional CMO deal, usually I'll pick 3, typically Facebook ads, email, and then IG organic. But how many are coming in from each of these? How much are we spending on each one? And then other metrics like what are they converting into on the back end? So we want to see how many leads we're bringing in, how many are we bringing in by channel, how much are we paying for them, and then also we're looking at what percentage of them are qualified, what percentage of them are marketing qualified leads. So that's where we're starting, number of leads that we have. Next, I want to look at booked calls. So how many booked calls did we get? I like to distinguish like the MQLs prior to the booked call, because I don't want my salespeople taking calls with, if we're trying to sell, say, a $25,000 service, I don't want them hopping on calls with people that have $500 in their bank account and have no income, just because it's kind of a waste of their time. So I like to distinguish qualified leads, MQLs, prior to the booked call. So how many booked calls are we getting? How much are we paying for those calls? So, what the dollar amount is. Then kind of similar to this, what is the lead? What's the source on them? Maybe that's Facebook ads, email, YouTube, whatever it is. So these are kind of the primary marketing metrics I'm looking at. Like how many leads are we getting? How many booked calls are we getting? If I'm looking at, marketing's responsibilities, marketing is responsible for three things. And that is lead volume, lead quality, and profitability. So if marketing is not able to keep calendars full, or at least like reasonably full, I'd say maybe like 75% full the majority of the time, they are fucking up. If marketing's lead quality is dropping off a cliff, their MQL percentage is terrible, they are fucking up. If we are really, really deep in the red, marketing is fucking up. If we can execute on these three things, keep lead volume solid, keep calendars stacked, make sure that the very large majority of these people coming in are quality leads, and make sure that from a profitability standpoint, we are in a solid spot, that means marketing has done its job, at least by my personal definitions. So those are the main kind of things that I do to judge marketing. Next, let's move on to sales. So if we're looking at kind of your traditional online business setter closer model, so I'm going to look at how many sets did a setter have? Or how many sets did the setter team have? Then we're going to look at it at an individual level. How many sets did, say, John or setter number one have? Then we're going to go down to revenue attributed. So how much revenue is attributed to the setter team? Then how much revenue is attributed to John, setter number one? So we want to have a pretty good pulse on how much revenue each setter is bringing in. Then we want to look at units. So how many units closed? So units would be like deals done. For example, if John, setter number one, sourced 20 units last month, and revenue, you're selling, say, a $10,000 price point, so that would be $200K in revenue. So that would be 20 units, $200K rev. Next, we're going to look at cash collected, because obviously, most of these people are not piffing or doing pay in fulls on all these deals. So we want to look at that. And that's really the main shit on setters, I'd say. So we can move on to closers now. This is pretty straightforward, I'd say. How many units did they get? How much revenue did they generate? What was their cash collected? And I'd also look at from an efficiency standpoint, what's their close rate? So, out of the number of calls that they took, how many calls did we put on their calendar? Another thing I look at, if we want to get a little bit deeper in the weeds, is offers made. Offers made, this is kind of a metric of like how many times they pitched. I'm pretty hands-on the marketing side in terms of like, all right, if calls are just not good, we're not going to have them take it. We're not going to have the closer take the call in the first place. So realistically, majority of these calls that the closers are taking, they should be making offers on the call, I'd say. So this is kind of like a metric of, I'd almost say, aggression. A lot of times when I was a kind of closer, for example, when you're kind of in your own head, you're not kind of going hard enough to close the deal, I'd say. A lot of times you'll be a little bit hesitant to pitch the offer. You'll DQ a prospect in your own mind and not pitch them. This is a good indication, I'd say, of like, are they actually going hard enough for the deal? I don't really know how to put it, but it's good to track your offers made just to kind of get a pulse on your closers, what kind of where their mindset is at on the call. Okay, so, and at a high level, I wouldn't necessarily say this is marketing specific or sales specific. We want to look at cost per acquisition, So that would be basically like how much does it cost us to acquire a client. Um, Next, we want to look at ROAS. This is for you non-marketers. This is return on ad spend. So if we spend $100,000, how much are we getting back? If we get back $120,000, that's 1.2 ROAS. So pretty bad there. And you want to divide ROAS into, like, one of the main metrics I look at is actually front end ROAS. That would be like the amount that our return on ad spend up front, because you can't necessarily bank on people completing a payment plan. If you have, say, 20K in contracted revenue and the sales team collects, say, 5K up front, we're going off of the 5K there as opposed to 20, if that makes sense. Feel free to drop a comment if it doesn't. I'm kind of running through this pretty fast, but basically a reason why you want to calculate front end ROAS is to see profitability, like from the front end, from the day the sale takes place, because the rest of the revenue beyond that initial cash collection, I'd say, is more of a function of the CS team. It's a function of, like, are you able to retain the clients or get them to complete their payment plan? And also, I think you cannot really make marketing decisions based off of contracted revenue as opposed to cash collected, because you don't have like a firm guarantee that you're actually getting that money. If you're collecting 25% upfront and you're banking on that remaining 75 coming in, depending on what you're selling, especially if you're selling like BizOp, for example, you're selling to a very broke audience, you don't know if you're getting the rest of that money. You can't really make decisions based off of that. So you really want to have, be aware of this front end ROAS. That's super important. And lastly, I would also look at things. So back end is important. So do we have recurring revenue coming in? Do we have, like, how many upsell units are we getting? Cross sells. Even things like, some of my clients still do affiliate deals, for example. These are great because these are all basically just inserting profit into the business. And this is a great way to KPI some of your CS team. But this isn't a 100% conclusive thing. Like, there's definitely other ways that you can, other factors you want to analyze inside client acquisition, but these are just kind of the main ones off the top of my head that I'm thinking of right now. And I like to have a pretty good pulse on every single one of these. So if you know these all to a T, chances are you have a pretty good, big picture understanding of client acquisition. And from here, what is more important, not just to know all of these things, know what these metrics are within your business, but you also need to know things like, are these metrics actually good? Like, for example, like when I do consulting, I'll just break down every single one of these numbers, and I just know from personal experience, like, if a number is good or bad. For example, I always shoot for I still do some email marketing client work. If only like 5% of revenue for the company is coming from email, I know for a fact that email is weak, versus if we're getting like 50% of revenue from email. I mean, that sounds great for me as an email marketer, but chances are that means we are doing a really poor job on other channels. I don't think that companies should be relying on 50% of their revenue to come from email. Chances are they are not doing a good job on the front end on deals coming out of ads or other channels. So, like, over time, you'll be able to see these numbers. You'll be able to know which ones are good and which ones are bad. I don't want to just like spit a bunch of numbers out off the top of my head here, because a lot of this is very like niche specific. If we're looking at like cost per booked call, for example, in some industries, it's acceptable to pay, like on the B2B side, some business owners will be okay with paying $700-800 per booked call, versus in other industries, it might be completely unacceptable to pay more than 200. So a lot of it's industry dependent. So I don't want to give specific numbers here, but you want to know all of these metrics to a T, and then eventually you want to know them well enough over a long enough duration of time so you can see which ones are good and which ones are bad. That way you can diagnose your own issues. You can see like where your bottlenecks are. You can see the weakest links in your overall client acquisition ecosystem, and then you can make improvements from there. So that is it for today. Just some things I was thinking about. Now, if you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat.